This is something that happened to me in the summer of 2018. I was 16 years old at the time. The small town that I called home was a quiet place where everyone knew each other. I lived near the town's center with my parents and my little brother. It was summer vacation, so I didn't have school. One of my friends, Jay, lived way out of town. It was about an hour walk each way, and I would often go over there and then walk back late at night, or sometimes I would stay over. I was over there on a Tuesday night. It was just me and Jay, because his parents were away for the evening. We had a good time, just hanging out in his backyard, where he had a fire pit and a hot tub. I didn't want to go, but as the midnight hour approached, I knew it was time for me to make my long journey back home. I told my parents I would be back that night. I said goodbye to Jay and headed out on my way back. The area was really safe, and I had made that trip many times before, so I wasn't scared at all. The road home stretched out before me, a solitary path flanked by vast fields of wheat swaying in the gentle breeze. The moon was full that night, so there was a lot of light considering the late hour. I could see at least a few hundred feet ahead of me on the road. There was not a car in sight though. I was very alone. I trudged down the road. The crunch of gravel beneath my feet was the only sound that I could hear. The eerie silence seemed to amplify the sound of my own heartbeat, quickening with each passing step. As I continued my journey, my eyes caught sight of a figure in the distance, a man walking towards me. At first there was nothing really alarming about his presence. I was curious though. It was rare for me to see someone else on these roads at night, and I didn't know who it could be. Jay was an only child, and there were only a few other houses for miles. The figure got closer with each step, and I became more and more nervous. I didn't know if I should hide, or just continue on. While I was making up my mind, I noticed the figure had disappeared. I thought for a moment that I might have imagined it, but I was really sure that I saw someone. There was only one place that he could have gone, and that was into the wheat field. I stopped in my tracks, too scared to walk any further. There was someone hiding up ahead, and I didn't know what he wanted. There was no way I was walking past that point. I did the only thing I could do, and that was to head back to Jay's house. I turned around and started walking quickly back in the other direction. I looked over my shoulder every few seconds, but didn't see anybody behind me. I started to think that I had overreacted. Maybe whoever it was just scared of me and decided to hide. I would later find out that that was not true though. I made it back to Jay's house and banged on the door. It took a few minutes for him to answer. I'm sure he was scared at first. I tried calling ahead, but Jay must have turned off his phone for the night. When I got there, I plugged my phone in and called my parents. They came to pick me up. On my way home, we saw a truck that we didn't recognize. Like I said, we lived in a small community, and there were not really any strangers, so it was weird to see that. We made it home, and didn't worry about it though. The scariest thing happened the next day. That's when I found out that there were several robberies in the area, including Jay's nearest neighbor. I'm pretty sure that figure I saw was involved, and the truck probably was too. I still don't know what they would have done if I'd continued walking that night. Perhaps the man hid because he didn't want me to see him, or maybe he was planning to ambush me. I may never know for sure, but I'm glad that I turned around when I did. It could have been a really bad mistake. I'm a 16-year-old guy who lives in the United States. The story takes place a few months after I got my driver's license. The town I live in is quite small, only having a family-owned grocery store, a McDonald's, and a Subway. Because of this, my friends and I would often venture into the surrounding towns for entertainment. The other town wasn't enormous either, but was decently sized, and it had a Walmart as well as access to an expressway. My friends and I got bored one day, and decided to take the 10-minute drive to Walmart and screw around inside. It was me and 3 of my close friends. We were back in the wilderness section looking at the fishing poles. To the right of the fishing poles was a couple of hatchet kits for survival. We paid no mind to them as we messed around. We noticed a man and his wife walk up and look at the hatchets. They were about 10 feet down from us, but we didn't pay them any mind. As we were standing there, the man looked over at us and muttered,
"You think I could kill someone and chop up the body with this bad boy?"
Then he pointed towards one of the hatchets. We all kind of looked at each other before I spoke up and said, "Absolutely." I assumed it was some sort of joke, and he didn't have a good sense of humor. I was just playing along, hoping for a laugh and then for him to move on. He smiled back at me, but not genuinely. It was almost like a smile of anger, which confused me. His teeth were decaying. It was then that I noticed that the man didn't seem very well kept. I glanced over at his wife to see her eyeing one of my friends, who we'll call Antonio. My other two friends, who we'll call Jake and Hunter, started walking away after realizing how creepy his smile was. I followed them. When we got further away, Antonio said to me, "What was that?" Then we all laughed. Eventually we left the store and spotted the couple driving in the parking lot. Before we left, Antonio said he had to go to the bathroom. Hunter tagged along because apparently he had to go as well. Me and Jake were sitting at one of those tables in the subway that was inside the Walmart. We were scrolling through our phones, waiting for our friends to finish. 2 minutes later, they returned, and then we all headed out of the Walmart. We saw the couple from earlier still circling the parking lot in an old beat-up Ford F-150. We stepped back inside before the truck spotted us. We let it past the entrance before sprinting to my Jeep that was luckily parked close. We hurried out of the parking lot, but not too dangerously, just going slightly fast. We heard the F-150 come barreling towards us from behind. We all snapped our heads around to see the thing going at least 30 or 40 miles per hour in the parking lot, before slamming on the brakes just behind us. Hunter leaned out my back window and flipped them off, and then we sped out of there. Then we got to the expressway, and eventually lost the couple. I don't know if they were just playing some sort of weird joke on us, but none of us found it funny. This is an older one, and certainly a memory that I've tried for decades to forget. Due to my father's work, we were constantly chasing after his jobs, sometimes spending only a few months in a single location. After my father got a new job in a small town, we moved into a rather nice house on a dead-end road. It was a large house with wood floors and a generally exceptional feel about it. Glad to have found a nice house in our price range, we didn't really think too much about why it was empty and why the landlords were willing to rent it out for such a low price. It would take a few months before we found out for ourselves what was going on. The haunting started as just a feeling that we kids would get from time to time. At first it was just a general sense of unease, but it quickly escalated. As time went on, we slowly transformed from simply thinking we were being watched to seeing forms in the corner of our eyes. The feeling of being watched had spread into the night at this point, and few of us were able to get a full night's rest. This continued on until we began to see things much closer, forefront in our vision. We had started seeing dark forms in the night, scaring us to the point where we'd all sleep in the same bed, just for a weak sense of security. Then we found the reason for the haunting. My brother and I were cleaning up an old closet that we had simply dumped a bunch of our toys into after we moved in. The bottom of it had a small wall, making it into somewhat of a built-in toy chest. We finally had some boxes to hold our toys, so we no longer needed to leave them in the closet. When we pulled our things out, we noticed that the carpet was loose. We were kids, so as such, we were not very smart. Instead of telling our parents, we just pulled the carpet back, revealing something none of us would ever forget. It was a tombstone. It was right there, with a name and dates already carved into it. Thinking there was someone buried in our closet, we quickly showed it to our parents. Thankfully, they decided to remove it from the house, and that was that, or so we thought. But the haunting didn't stop. We started to have nightmares and sick spells whenever we were alone in the house. All I knew was fear when I was in that place. I would awake at all hours in the night to see a dark figure standing over me, watching me sleep. I would cover my head with my sheets and pray to God to protect me. Usually it worked, but sometimes I would lower the sheet to see the dark ghostly face now staring me in the eye. Its face was only inches from my own. Soon we were all seeing faces in the dark, and we stopped doing things on our own during the night. We would share beds, and we would never get up to do anything on our own. We would often wake up whoever we were sleeping with to go to the bathroom or get a drink of water. The final straw happened one night. I was foolishly walking around the house late during a lightning storm. As I walked into my room, lightning flashed at just the right moment, and I saw a figure under my bed, staring at me with a grin that literally ran from ear to ear. Its needle-like teeth bared for me to see. I screamed in absolute terror, and it would take days for me to be willing to even play in my room. We removed the bed frames and started sleeping on our mattresses on the floor for protection from whatever I saw, but the nightmares and sightings would continue. Thankfully, my father's job forced us to move to a new location, and we were able to leave that house. In just 6 months, we went from happy to have such a nice home to wanting nothing more than to leave it behind. I'll never forget that horror, and it has left permanent scars on my soul. Even to this day, over 25 years later, I still have nightmares. God only knows what monsters were living in there with us. Just writing this has left my heart pounding with fear from that memory. I live in Alabama, in a rural yet woodsy neighborhood in a small town. I was 17 at the time this took place, which was around 2 years ago. I was at home one night bored, hanging around with my little brother, who was 14 at the time. We were playing Pokemon Go. It was about midnight at the time, and we played for a couple hours. We were geeking out over it, because we both used to play Pokemon on our Game Boys. We loved it as kids. At around 2 or 3 a.m., we decided to go out and play the game. We wanted to walk around the neighborhood, looking for Pokemon. Where we live is usually a pretty quiet, peaceful neighborhood, without much ever going on. There might be the occasional neighbor walking their dog, or even neighbors yelling, but nothing to ever worry about. We headed out of our house and walked down the driveway, which is pretty long. It was about a quarter mile. Then we went down the road. The neighborhood itself is like a giant U, and from beginning to the farthest point is about 5 miles in total. It's really spread out and simple. While walking, we were having the best time ever, just making random small talk and feeling like rebels for leaving our house so late, especially since we were basically sheltered as kids. We both caught a lot of Pokemon and reached about 3 miles into the backwoods area of our neighborhood. Eventually, our enthusiasm for Pokemon hunting waned, and we decided to head back home. On the way back, we felt completely safe and fearless. We felt that nothing could bother us in our quiet little area. As usual, there were no cars whatsoever out driving that late. I don't really know when, but when we were about 5 houses, or maybe what people would consider 1 block away from home, that's when we saw a car coming from the back of our neighborhood down the really long road. We thought nothing of it at first, that is until it reached us. When it was close, it slowed down a lot and almost came to a stop about 2 feet behind us. We were slowly walking along the side of the road when I realized this was pretty strange. I felt very scared all of a sudden. The car followed us for maybe about 50 feet, which might have been 2 or 3 minutes. When I whispered something to my brother, I can't remember what, but probably something like this. You understand how this looks, don't you? I glanced over to my left. There was a house with a lot of trees surrounding the front lawn. At that moment, we both had the same idea. Right when we both saw it click in each other's eyes, we bolted up the hill, into the yard, and into the trees. When we got there, the trees blocked our view from the street. We always thought we were stealthy and tactile, but this situation showed us how vulnerable we really were. When we reached a point where we knew they couldn't see us anymore, we went on the ground on our stomachs. We watched the road from there, and in between some trees. We watched as this car was stopped in the middle of the road for a couple minutes. What he, she, or they might be wanting or doing was unknown to us, but we were pretty sure that they were up to no good. They started off again, from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. The engine was roaring like that of a muscle car. The tires slightly squealed. They were gone just like that. Me and my brother waited laying there for what seemed like forever, because we were a ways away from home and we didn't want to be seen. We had no idea what they wanted or what could have happened if we continued walking down the street and paid them no attention. Both of us were visibly shaken. We never said much of anything to each other during those moments either. I'm just glad we were both quick on our feet. We did get up and ran around the back of some houses, all the way back to ours. We burst in the door, locked it, and turned off all the lights, and we went straight to our mom. She happened to be awake and scolded us for going out so late and getting ourselves possibly abducted, or worse. We watched out our front windows from the house, expecting to see them again, and sure enough, we did. They passed by the front of our house 3 times, until we just never saw them again. Still to this day, I've never seen the same car again. Call it luck, being blessed, or whatever. All I can tell you is this. We possibly made it away from a confused person, seeing 2 kids out that late, walking the long roads. Otherwise, we made it away from a real threat. Someone who decided to follow 2 kids and drive away quickly. It seemed like they knew they were busted or outplayed. After thinking it over, I was determined they spotted and followed us from the deep part of our neighborhood. It creeps me out to this day to think about it. Please, stay inside at night. Don't put yourself into a situation that could end up badly for yourself or others with you. Stay alert, watch your surroundings. Be safe, people.